Chapter 15, Something New. Wanyanyekavu, being the last one to prepare his plate, sat down on his air mattress. As a Wakatilian, we pay attention to history and believe in our ancestry. Most of us believe in Sabaoth, for we believe that a tree without roots shall perish, just as a man who does not take heed of his past. Life has a funny way of recycling events in our life, when we don't pass them the first time around, just like taking any other test. You have to take the test repeatedly until you get it right. Louisiana, he said, pointing to Jonathan. It is prosperous but filled with hatred and lots of history. Not only that, many cultures come from it, such as the French, Spanish, European, Native American, and African slave descendants, as well as a combination of all of them. For example, mixing these cultures created people like the Cajuns and Creoles from the southern parts and descendants of Native Americans from the northern part. Some practice black magic, voodoo, and witchcraft, and some worship Sabaoth. You had the French who practice voodoo, some practice witchcraft, and some worship Sabaoth for each culture. It is the same scenario for each practice or belief. I can trace this back to when Louisiana became Louisiana and the trans-African slave trade began. The same history is true of those from the islands in the West Indies because of the trans-African slave trade, when words like mulatto and the Code Noir became famous. The brutality of slave owners and slaveholders, who raped men, women, and children alike, created these mulattoes. The cruelty of the slaves from Africa and the dark-skinned natives created children of white fathers and slave mothers, who were then classified as these mulattoes. It meant a person with white and black parents, but eventually it was used for any mixed-race people, period. Colorism, racism, and discrimination were the most effective weapons against us, but colorism pitted us against ourselves. Lighter-skinned slaves were treated more favorably than those with darker skin. It upholds the white standards of beauty and benefits white people in their institutions of oppression. We all know they assign slaves with lighter skin with domestic tasks, while they force slaves with darker skin to work outside in the fields, doing much more as well as harder work. The paper bag test was often used. If someone was the same color or lighter than a paper bag, they were accepted. If they were any darker than a paper bag, they were not. In New Orleans, the southeastern part of Louisiana, the Code Noir was used daily, which defined mulatto again as 1/2 white, half black, quadroon, 3/4 white, 1/4 black, octoroon, 7/8 white, 1/8 black. The Code Noir created colorism wherein the black community, dark-skinned men and women, preferred lighter-skinned blacks because they felt their children would have a higher social position, and light-skinned blacks made up the largest percentage of the free black population. Very few people know that some white women were indentured servants and had children with slaves and free African-descended men. Because of the mother's status, those children were born free and often married other free people of color. A large number of slaves in the United States during the 19th century were of mixed race, and with each generation, the number of mixed-race slaves doubled every 10 years. All the different cultures mixed with one another. Meanwhile, in places up north, like Utah, sexual relationships with a slave resulted in the slave automatically being freed. Wanyanyekava paused for a minute. "Excuse me, I was trying to educate Jonathan about something he said a few months back, and I got sidetracked." Reaching into his bag, he grabbed an old torn book. "This is my Torah. It was once called the Bible back in the days, but it had fewer books than it has now. We should now have enough for everyone now. In it are the words and life of Sabaoth's children and Sabaoth himself." They all started reading from the Torah, and hours passed before they fell asleep. Jonathan was half asleep. "Hey, turn that light off!" he shouted to Joan. Joan replied, "You turn it off." "I turned it off before I went to bed." The light got brighter and brighter. Wanyanyekava turned over. "Will someone please turn that light?" Staring straight into the sky, Wanyanyekava saw a circular object with a large beam of light coming from its center and many smaller lights circling it, going right to left and then left to right. "Look up!" shouted Wanyanyekava. Fear had consumed them all. Then a voice was heard by the entire group. Be not afraid, for he is a prophet of Sabaoth,